the weather. Our first look at the weather. Nick Miller is at the BBC Weather Centre. Morning, Nick.
Good morning. It's a mild week to come, prevailing southerly winds. It's a week that gets wetter and windier from Wednesday. Just light winds, though, to start the week this morning. But it is cloudy, it's damp, it's misty, it's foggy out there. Let's take a look around the UK, what we can expect for today. Starting in southwest England and Wales, where it's cloudy. There's some patchy rain clearing away eastwards. And then we're expecting some showers to come in, already a few into southwest England. And some of these will be heavy and possibly thundery today, but there'll be a few brighter spells developing around the showers. For southeast England, the Midlands, eastern England and across northern England, well, it's a foggy start for some of us here. It's cloudy, it's damp, some outbreaks of rain, initially clearing away eastwards from eastern counties. But we'll see further patchy rain spreading north and east as we go through the day, though not amounting to very much. For Northern Ireland, it's a cloudy start, some patchy rain clearing away eastwards. It will brighten up a little bit this afternoon, and while many places will be dry, still a chance of catching a shower. In Scotland, the south, central belt, east, mainly cloudy. Some outbreaks of rain initially clearing eastern parts, then some further patchy rain will spread in during the day. For northern Scotland, though, this is where we're looking mainly dry, and there will be a few sunny spells around here. Now, I said it's a mild week to come, and today temperatures across the UK mainly in the range of 12 to 15 degrees Celsius, as high as 16 in southeast England, and we're not expecting any frost this week.
Nick, thank you. Shall we look at the papers at 7 minutes past 6? A smiling Joe Biden is on the front page of the Eye over the headline, "Hello, Mr. President," as those papers assess what his election is going to mean. The Guardian says he's facing a daunting challenge. He's determined to hit the ground running, making coronavirus his top priority, along with tackling unemployment, systemic racism and the climate crisis. Oh, not very much then. The Financial Times thinks he's going to reverse some of Donald Trump's signature policies, and it highlights how his promise to make his cabinet the most diverse in American history. The FT, interestingly, suggesting he's going to use executive orders to do much of that. According to the Washington Post, the President-elect wants to seize the momentum by taking a proactive role in congressional talks designed to draw up measures to boost America's economy.
The Telegraph says the pressure's growing on Donald Trump to go quietly. Not only has the former Republican President George W. Bush offered his congratulations to Joe Biden, but the paper reports the First Lady Melania Trump is urging her husband to concede, although other papers have different versions of that. The New York Times says top Republicans remain divided as to whether to admit the election is over, even though most Trump advisors said the chances of challenging the result through the courts are exceedingly slim.
The Express is hopeful that Joe Biden will do a trade deal worth tens of billions of pounds with the UK, saying his aides have vowed that Brexit Britain will remain a significant ally. Others, though, question the President-elect's enthusiasm for such an agreement, partly because the Prime Minister's past criticism of Barack Obama. The Huffington Post thinks some Democrats haven't forgiven Boris Johnson for claiming 4 years ago that Mr. Obama's part Kenyan ancestry made him hostile to Britain.
According to the Times lead, the intelligence agency GCHQ has begun an offensive cyber operation against propaganda which aims to undermine confidence in a coronavirus vaccine. The paper describes it as the latest move to counter activity linked to Moscow, which is attempting to exploit the pandemic, undermine the West and boost Russian interest.
The impact of Covid-19 on NHS staff makes the front page of the Daily Mirror. "We're all burnt out," is its headline, as it covers a letter from 14 health unions to the Prime Minister, warning that without an immediate pay boost, staff could quit in droves.
The Daily Mail says the BBC is in crisis because of the questions over tactics used by Martin Bashir to get his famous interview with Princess Diana. It says that royal aides who claim their reputations were tarnished in the process may sue for serious damages, and it quotes the former BBC chairman Lord Grade, who's called for an urgent independent inquiry. The corporation says there will be an independent investigation, and Martin Bashir is currently signed off work by doctors.
And The Sun reports that Prince Harry was deeply saddened because his Remembrance Day wreath lay unused yesterday as a result of a palace ban on it being laid at the cenotaph. According to the paper, palace chiefs rejected his request for the wreath to be placed on his behalf because he'd quit royal duties in March.
It's 11 minutes past 6. Joe Biden is preparing for power, but Donald Trump is still hanging in there. We can talk now to David Willis, our North American correspondent, beginning with the Biden transition and this pandemic task force. I guess the wearing of masks is going to be a pretty big issue.
Absolutely, Martha. And today, or later today, Joe Biden is due to unveil details of that 12-person coronavirus task force comprised of scientists and health experts that will be ready to go into action once he's sworn into office on the 20th of January. The virus, of course, has already claimed more than 238,000 American lives, and the number of infections has been at record levels in recent days. It's just one of the actions that Mr. Biden is taking, and he's wasting little time preparing for his ascent to the White House.
But Donald Trump is showing no signs of wanting to give up the keys to the White House.
Yes, he has yet to concede defeat in this election, and he's continuing to claim on Twitter that there was voter fraud and that he's the rightful winner of the election. Now, there are reports here suggesting that there are those in the president's inner circle who would like to see him concede, others who are urging him to keep fighting, but it seems he's adopting the latter option. His campaign spokesman, Tim Murta, has said that Mr. Trump is intending to hold mass rallies in different places throughout the country to build support for the legal battles that lie ahead, at which, according to some reports here, Mr. Trump will brandish the obituaries of dead people who he claims voted in this election. Now, the Trump campaign has also been soliciting donations to fund its legal battle, and they're assembling teams in Georgia, Arizona and Pennsylvania at the moment, the plan being to fight on two fronts, in the courts and through what's been described as a campaign-style media operation, Martha.
David Willis, thank you.
13 minutes past 6. 6 weeks into the war for control of Nagorno-Karabakh, the president of Azerbaijan, Aliyev, has told the BBC that he doesn't see a possibility for peace under the current Prime Minister of Armenia. In an interview in Baku, our international correspondent Ola Gerin asked President Aliyev if there was any compromise that he could offer for the sake of peace.
What compromise they're ready to do. And by the way, today, the opportunities to compromise is shrinking because we are getting those territories back by force. So they're losing time. And if they behave reasonably, we can work on some forms of self-governance. We are not against it. But frankly speaking, with this Prime Minister of Armenia, I don't think that there's any possibility for peace.
Let's talk live to Ola Gerin, our correspondent who's conducting that interview. Interesting to hear from Aliyev there, but he obviously thinks he's winning, and because he's winning on the ground in military terms, he doesn't need to do anything else.
Absolutely. I mean, the long-term leader of Azerbaijan was sounding very confident when we spoke to him, Justin, and he can well afford to be. His forces have been advancing steadily here over the last 6 weeks, and critically over the weekend he announced what for Azerbaijan is a key victory. He said yesterday that they had taken a town known to Azerbaijanis as Shusha. Now, this is a place of key military and symbolic importance for both sides in this conflict. That claim has been denied from Armenian sources. They say there is fierce fighting going on, but what is not in dispute is that there has been a mass civilian exodus from the town of Shusha and also from the nearby city of Stepanakert. So as President Aliyev sits that he's winning on the ground, why would he need to offer any kind of concessions at the negotiating table? Now, that said, there have been suggestions, leaks actually coming from Turkey, that there may be yet another ceasefire deal in the works. We've already seen 3 of those come and go here. They haven't stuck, and I think it's very unlikely that this one would stick either. There is a very strong level of public support here behind what President Aliyev is doing. There were very significant celebrations yesterday in the streets after that announcement was made about Shusha. We saw people out driving, bringing their children, waving flags, cheering. We met a former refugee from Nagorno-Karabakh who said that this meant she would now be going home. So the public sentiment here is that people want the president to continue.
And Ola, if the Armenians now go to Russia, go to Putin and say, look, we're in trouble, do something, do you think he does?
I think probably not. I mean, they have already said as much. There has been a formal request from the Armenian Prime Minister, Nikol Pashinyan, to President Putin saying, what kind of assistance can you provide? Now, there is a common military defence pact between the two countries, but Moscow has been at pains to state that that applies in the case of an attack on Armenian territory, not on Nagorno-Karabakh. So far, militarily, the Armenians are on their own. I did ask President Aliyev if at any stage he would try to bring in Turkey militarily, because, of course, he has incredibly strong support from President Erdogan. He said that support for now is just in the form of diplomatic statements and solidarity. He said he didn't need Turkish military support on the ground because he has an army of his own that is 100,000 strong. But certainly he can rely on Turkey for backing support and expertise, and critically the use of Turkish military drones.
Ola Garin, thank you.
17 minutes past 6. On the campaign trail, Joe Biden promised to increase taxes on companies and on the wealthy. Will he be able to carry out that promise? Here's Don with that and the rest of the business news. Morning, Don.
Yes, good morning, Martha. Well, the numbers in Congress, in particular in the Senate, the upper house, might mean that he has difficulty pushing through his economic plans. We'll talk to an advisor to the Biden transition team shortly. Also this morning, if your business missed out on a coronavirus bounce-back loan and you thought you'd missed the deadline, well, all is not lost. There's a 3-month extension that starts today. We'll talk to the chief executive of Starling Bank. And what should we expect from financial markets now that Biden is president-elect? Well, as you heard earlier in the news bulletin, Asian markets have had a very good night. The Nikkei index, the main Tokyo index, up 2.5%. First, though, Mr. Biden and the US economy. I've been speaking to Felicia Wong. She's on the advisory board for the transition team. She's also president of the liberal think tank, the Roosevelt Institute. I asked her about Mr. Biden's campaign promises.
Well, what's really notable about Joe Biden's campaign trail promises is that they kind of reflect his political superpowers, right? Here in the United States, we have focused a lot on the fact that empathy and building big tent political coalitions are what Joe Biden has been all about. And I do think that those policy ideas were reflected in his campaign. At the heart of his economic promises were a combination of tax increases, especially taxes on the wealthy and on corporations, but also really economic inclusion and good jobs for all Americans who are out of work, especially for Black Americans.
Policies, though, that are sharply at odds with those of Donald Trump, who cut taxes for corporations and for wealthy people, but of course at the same time talked to the working class with this Make America Great, bringing back manufacturing. This is going to be a complete break in policy, isn't it?
That's right. If Joe Biden is able to pursue this dual strategy of economic transformation through job creation and through decarbonizing the American economy, and at the same time raising taxes on corporations and on the wealthy, which, by the way, is a good economic set of policies, because these are places where there is a lot of money that is being essentially trapped at the top and needs to be recirculated throughout the American economy. But if he can bring these two things together, it would be very, very different from Donald Trump's policies.
The immediate problem that confronts the U.S. economy and indeed the president-elect is the coronavirus. Donald Trump had one way of tackling it. How do you think Joe Biden will go about it?
Joe Biden has always said, he said again last night, that getting the pandemic under control is the first step towards, building back a better American society, American democracy, American economy. And that will be his first step. He is going to name a pandemic task force, I think, within the next few days. And I am sure that that task force will focus on public health, but will also have some economic elements, making sure that drug prices and that availability of PPE are available to all people, and they're made within the United States.
Mr. Biden's strength and his record has been for bipartisanship. He's the person who was able to get things done across party divides. Is there a potential trap in that from the left of the Democratic Party, who might think that actually he won't be or can't be radical enough?
I think one of Joe Biden's other political superpowers is that everything that he says or proposes suddenly becomes the new normal. And a lot of what he has proposed in his policy program up until now, again, taxes on the wealthy, taxes on corporations, the idea that we need to really invest in new decarbonized sectors of the economy. Suddenly, these are actually ideas that have come from the progressive part of the Democratic Party, and suddenly they're central, they're mainstream in American politics. We shouldn't be naive. It's not going to be easy. Very few things are easy in American politics. But I think Biden's promises are clearly compelling. They were compelling to almost 75 million Americans. I think they're going to be good for the economy, and I certainly hope he has the power to get all of them done.
That was Felicia Wong of the Roosevelt Institute. Now, to get through the pandemic, many companies, of course, applied for bounce-back loans, loans of up to £50,000. They come through the banks, but are guaranteed by the government. The scheme was meant to have shut at the end of last month, but there's been an extension. Lots of companies, of course, have complained that in practice they can't get a bounce-back loan because banks are saying that you can't have one unless you're already a business customer. I've been speaking to Anne Bowden, Chief Executive of Starling Bank. I started by asking her what kind of demand she expects today.
In the initial phases of the bounce-back loans back in May, we had a lot of demand. And then after a couple of months, it actually trailed off. But now we're seeing new businesses that are suffering for the first time, wanting to take advantage of a loan.
And it's worth pointing out, is it, that businesses who haven't taken the full $50,000 can come back to top up their loan?
Yes, businesses are allowed to take out a loan for up to 25% of their turnover or £50,000, whichever is the lowest. So we have a number of customers who will probably come back for a top-up loan over the next couple of months.
You've advanced about £1.1 billion worth of bounce-back loans. What proportion is that of your total business loan book?
Our total business loan book is coming up to now about 1.8 billion, so it's a high percentage of our loan book.
Aren't you a bit worried, given what the National Audit Office and others have had to say about the likelihood of these loans being paid back? Some estimates suggest that 60% of these bounce-back loans will never be paid back.
I think that the Chancellor decided to get loans into the hands of these customers very quickly and decided to guarantee those loans. So these loans are guaranteed by government, and we are there to make sure those loans get to people very efficiently. And we expect that the default levels are going to be very high. And we have responsibility for recovering those loans, but we will not be responsible for the write-offs or the debt.
But it's a slightly awkward position to be in, isn't it? Because, as you say, the banks are responsible in the first instance for using all the normal means to try and recover the money from the person who's taken the loan. And if that doesn't work, then you could end up with, what, a £600 million call on the taxpayer?
I think that the whole process of getting those loans into the hands of customers was a very courageous decision by the Chancellor. It has meant that many businesses have survived that would have failed. In the initial stages, it is felt that these businesses perhaps had 2 weeks working capital. So the decision was taken to move quickly to get the money into the hands of customers. The consequences are that there is going to be a number of customers will not pay back those loans, and a number of those loans will be fraudulent. And that is the consequence of this process. However, at Starling, we have great systems for detecting fraud, such as looking up all the records in company's house and checking that the customer is a real customer and the directors actually exist. So we have great systems for detecting that. But there will be losses, and that will be covered by the taxpayer. And I think when I blogged back in May this year and said that those losses will be significant, and we have to be very, very careful that we lend to the right people and we don't get exploited as an industry and as taxpayers.
That was Anne Bowden of Starling Bank talking about bounce-back loans. My markets guest this morning is Randeep Somal. He's Director of Global Equities at M&G Investments. Randeep, good morning. Very interesting, the stock market reaction to Joe Biden becoming president-elect. Asian markets were up strongly overnight. The Nikkei is now at a near 30-year high. It was up 2.5% overnight. US markets have also reacted quite well. Why?
I think, well, first and foremost, it looks as if the uncertainty of who's going to be the president is going away, with world leaders now coming out and openly congratulating both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris now. I think the market can focus now on the policies that Joe Biden is likely to enact going forward, as opposed to this constant, is it going to be litigious? Are we looking at another potential Bush-Gore event like we saw in 2000, where it took 6 or 7 weeks to get a realization of what was going to happen? That, you know, there hasn't been mass destruction across the US, which potentially was reported as well, with lots of businesses being boarded up. It does look like the situation is starting to get itself under control.
And it's clear, it's in part of his transition team website, that Joe Biden plans to rejoin the Paris Accord on climate change pretty quickly.
Yes, I mean, the US actually only left on the 4th of November, which is when Donald Trump took them out. And President-elect Biden has said that his first issue of business when entering the Oval Office will be to sign an executive order to take the US back into the Paris climate deal. Now, this is very positive. It is, however, at this stage, simply symbolic in that he can sign it through, but without legislation, there isn't really much he can do. And as your caller alluded to earlier, it looks as if the Republicans are going to keep hold of the Senate, but Joe Biden will need to work with Mitch McConnell, as well as his own Democratic House, to ensure any legislation to back that up also comes through. But it's a very good statement of intent.
Let's have a quick look ahead to what's happening this week in the UK. On Thursday, we get the third quarter GDP number. It should be a big one-off jump, perhaps a 15% increase. Does that, though, give us a true picture of what's happening in the UK economy?
No, I mean, obviously it's Q3, like you say, and since we've moved on from that time period, the UK has now re-entered a lockdown, unfortunately. So potentially we're likely to see that come off again. Probably not like what we saw in Q2 earlier this year. But until we can get through Corona, unfortunately, these numbers are going to move around, and they probably don't mean a huge amount. The key thing will now be to try and defeat the virus and get to a point where we're not talking about lockdowns anymore.
Thank you very much. Randeep Samel from M&G Investments.
Don, thank you. 28 minutes past 6. Time for the sport, and here's Rob.
Good morning, Justin. Leicester, Southampton, and after yesterday evening's win at Arsenal, newly promoted Aston Villa in the Premier League's top 6. An early suggestion, but of course nothing more in November, that this season's Premier League title race may involve a number of contenders. Match report on Arsenal 0, Aston Villa 3 from Alistair Bruce Ball.
Another eye-catching result in this topsy-turvy Premier League season, but Aston Villa were full value for this comprehensive victory against a strangely subdued Arsenal. John McGinn thought he'd given Villa the lead after just 45 seconds, but his thumping effort was ruled out when VAR spotted Ross Barkley was offside and in Bernd Leno's eye-line. No matter. Barkley, Jack Grealish and Matt Targett combined to force Bukayo Saka to score an own goal not long after, and Ollie Watkins then did the rest in the second half. Brilliantly teed up by Barkley's volley cross for the second goal, and Grealish played him in for the third to finish off a pitch-length move. Arsenal were chasing shadows.
Manchester City against Liverpool was billed as the game of the day, but an eventful first half with a penalty from Liverpool's Salah and an equaliser from City's Jesus was all the goal action produced. Plenty more VAR dispute, though, with Liverpool's Gomez adjudged guilty for a handball offence, but City's De Bruyne missed the penalty. And that wasn't the only controversy. There were pleas afterwards from both managers for a return to 5 substitutes per team because of player exhaustion, plus this from Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp on better match scheduling for teams also in European competition.
No team who plays on Wednesday night, away or in Champions League, should have the 12:30 kickoff on Saturday. That's not allowed. And Tottenham played on Thursday in Ludogorets and had today the 12 o'clock kickoff. Play Sunday, no problem. Play Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, but not the 12:30. That's a complete killer. You wake up and you play football in a complete recovery phase.
Liverpool third in the Premier League this morning, but Leicester City top after a 1-0 win against Wolves. Jamie Vardy with another penalty, again controversial, while a late winner from Harry Kane gave second-place Tottenham a 1-0 win at West Bromwich Albion. So goals in relatively short supply in England, but Rangers have recorded their biggest win under Steven Gerrard. They beat Hamilton 8-0 to stay 9 points clear at the top of the Scottish Premiership. And in England's Women's Super League, a 1-0 win for Manchester United against Arsenal has taken them to the top of the table for the first time. Elsewhere, Britain's Hugh Carthy has secured a podium finish with third place in cycling's Volta a España, while in rugby union Leinster have maintained their perfect start to their Pro 14 title defence with a 26-7 win at Ospreys. And so here are the tips then. Kempton, 2:15, number 3, movie legend. Carlisle, 4 o'clock, number 1, Barnabas Collins.
Rob, thank you. This week, Radio 4 investigates the natural world.
As a species, we humans are pretty amazing. But when we face a problem...
Help! We're lost in the woods!
Instead of creating a new solution, should we be looking to nature for help? Dung beetles navigating by the light of our galaxy. Oh, that's nice. This is Nature Bang with Becky Ripley and Emily Knight.
Do naked mole rats defy aging?
They look like saber-toothed sausage.
And have dogs mastered quantum mechanics?
Dogs align urination and defecation along the north-south magnetic axis.
Join us for the new series of Nature Bang, beginning tomorrow morning at 9:30 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
29 minutes to 7. You're listening to Today on Radio 4. Martha Carney, Justin Webb and Chris Aldridge is here with a summary of the news.
The US President-elect Joe Biden is due to name a task force of experts he's asked to draw up plans to tackle Covid-19. Mr. Biden will also focus on the economy, racism and climate change as he pushes ahead with preparations to take office in January. Donald Trump is still refusing to accept the result of last week's presidential election. He's posted more Twitter messages claiming that the vote was stolen without providing any proof. His campaign team is preparing a series of legal challenges. There's been an appreciable rise in Asian stock markets after confirmation that Joe Biden had won the US election. Shares were generally up by more than 1%, but in Japan the Nikkei index closed up more than 2% after reaching its highest levels since 1991. The latest figures show there have now been more than 50 million cases of COVID-19 globally. The United States has become the first country in the world to surpass 10 million infections. New nationwide coronavirus restrictions have come into force in Wales after a 17-day lockdown ended. Businesses forced to close can reopen today, and 2 households can once again form a bubble. Travel is now also permitted anywhere in the country, although ministers have insisted people will still need to live differently. The EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, is in London for more talks on a post-Brexit trade deal with the UK. Separately, the House of Lords will vote today on controversial legislation the government says is needed to protect the integrity of the UK once the Brexit transition period ends on the 31st of December. Part of the Internal Market Bill breaks international law. Research for the BBC suggests that many disabled people are struggling during the pandemic because they say their needs are being overlooked. A survey of more than 1,000 people by the polling group YouGov was commissioned to mark the 25th anniversary of the Disability Discrimination Act. The findings point to problems getting essentials such as medication and even equipment to help people breathe. The government says it's fully considered the needs of disabled people throughout the pandemic.
Thank you. Just coming up to 25 to 7. Remember Brexit? It is, of course, still there. Our final departure from the EU, with or without a trade deal, is coming up in, just 7.5 weeks' time. And in the Lords today, as we were hearing in the news, there is an important vote. Jonathan Blake is our political correspondent. Jonathan, the Internal Markets Bill, what's going to happen?
Well, it's a big marker in its passage through Parliament. Committee stage in the Lords is not necessarily always an appointment to view, but there are likely to be votes on removing those controversial clauses relating to Northern Ireland, which, as you were hearing just now, would allow the UK to circumvent the withdrawal agreement, which sets the terms of our departure from the EU and, as such, break international law. And there are many in the House of Lords who see that as contradicting the withdrawal agreement and will attempt to remove those parts. Now, there is no sense at this point that the government is willing to let those controversial clauses which have caused alarm, not least with the coming incumbent of the White House over in the United States, slide. And as the Prime Minister said yesterday, the parliamentary timetable goes ahead relating to the Internal Market Bill, and the whole point of that is to protect and uphold the Good Friday Agreement and the peace process in Northern Ireland.
And I suppose one of the things there that might make it all moot is if we did have the deal, and Barnier is back in London today.
Yes, the talks continue this morning. Michel Barnier meets Lord Frost, the UK's chief negotiator. Again, the Prime Minister saying what sounds like a familiar refrain at this point. The outline of a deal is pretty clear, he said, but there are significant differences between the two sides, although he did say that a deal is there to be done. And yes, were there to be significant progress in the coming weeks, and by the time a deal took shape and was signed off and that internal markets bill came back to the Commons in December, the political landscape would be very different. But perhaps still an argument to be made and won with Joe Biden, who weighed into the debate around that controversial legislation, that it does in fact strengthen the Good Friday Agreement rather than weaken it.
Jonathan Blake, thank you.